Hello, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland. Sorry, I'm almost recumbent in a decidedly relaxed pose. Yes, one of my numberless faithful viewers made a special request, and if you cross my palm with silver, I am more likely to look with favour upon your petition. She asked of me that I make a video about Longleat. Now, I'm afraid I am not. I am not in Longleat, even though this place, well, let's say it's not small, but this is what YouTube can buy you. Okay, so Longleat, in case you don't know, is the seat of the Marquess of Bath. So, what is a marquess? A marquess is a heritable noble title, a marquisate. That's to say, rather than be called Mr. Whoever, they'd be called the Marquess of Place, whatever the place is. In this case, Bath. Not where I immerse my undercarriage for the sake of ablutions. No, Bath being a town in southern England, aquae sulis, if you're a classicist. So obviously the hot springs there, natural hot springs, have been there since the dawn of time. But when Julius Caesar, the Roman geezer, came to these shores, and the Romans, they subjugated the ancient Britons. The ancient Britons worshipped a god there called Sulis, or Sul, but in the Romans said aquae sulis, the water of Sul, is being the genitive ending, water of Sul, aquae sulis. But the Anglo-Saxons then called it Bath because that's where we bathe and blah, blah, blah. Supposedly helpful to invalids. That's a bit non-PC. God, I'm remembering Mr. Shortland-Jones and others who taught me Latin many moons ago. My goodness, a quarter of a century ago. Probably Mr. Shortland-Jones has been called to his reward. We used to call him Short-Hand Jones because he's missing a finger like that. And he wasn't shy of showing us. And then like that, and poking his stubby finger into the top of your skull if you couldn't conjugate things, couldn't do the like that. I have a finger, but he didn't, not all the way. Anyway, back to Bath, the Marquess of Bath. So if you curried favour with the monarch, then you'd be raised in this feudal system. Most of us were peasants. Some people got to be a knight, passed from father to son. There's several sons, for the eldest son only. And only those born within wedlock could get this. If a man had children outside of marriage, they were not eligible for these heritable titles. So likewise, and there's Baron, Viscount, Earl, Marquess, and Duke. Okay? So Marquess is very, very high on the social scale. Only about 50 marquesses in the whole of the British Isles. But and if a marquess had his title relating to his place, well, as they invariably did, it was where he had a large estate. That's a Marquess of Bath, so had a big estate not far from the town of Bath, and then set up their principal seat not too far from the town of Bath. So that's where Longleat is. So there originally was an Augustinian monastery there, as in monks of the order of St. Augustine were there. Now, one of the many Christian saints, and St. Augustine, I don't know why he became a saint, forgive me. Well, there's St. Augustine of Hippo, there's St. Augustine the other way. There's St. Augustine's Priory in London, Catholic girls' schools, another St. Augustine's church in Hammersmith, and blah, blah, blah. So notice it's pronounced St. Augustine, not Augustine, even ends with an E. Anyway, the dissolution of the monarchy in the 1530s, when Henry of that name, the Eighth, decided to terminate England's relationship with the Universal Church, and eventually this occasioned the dissolution of the monasteries from 1534 onwards. His Lord Chancellor was Thomas Cromwell, after Sir Thomas More was made a head shorter, and Sir Thomas Cromwell, that collateral ancestor of Oliver Cromwell, decided he would do his master's bidding, work his wicked will, and close down these religious houses, these convents, monasteries, abbeys, and priories, where monks and nuns were there for their orisons, these prayer factories, where they did their good works to honour our Lord and Saviour and the Holy Trinity and all the rest of it. So we sent commissioners around to inquire what was going on in these religious houses. Were there naughty nuns? Were there the sort of nuns you'd see in a porn film? Usually not, actually. Were there drunken monks? And were they bawdy? Were they using bad language? playing dice, taking oaths, blah, blah, blah? Were they Chaucerian frauds, befooling the people with buffoonery, tomfoolery, hoaxes and so forth? Yes, occasionally they were. But the commissioners came back and tried to dig the dirt and say, come on, spill the beans. Tell me some scandalous, salacious tales about the religious. The reports came back, and sometimes Thomas Cromwell said, these aren't actually shocking enough. I want something a bit spicier, a bit saucier, a bit raunchier. Go back, write it again. So they used to sometimes rewrite something which would indict them even more. Obviously, if a monk or nun behaves well, that's just not a talking point. It's remarkable if they behave scandalously. So I suppose these are far more eye-catching, shocking behaviour than virtuous behaviour. You always make more money out of being rude than being nice. Anyway, so this was used to warrant the dissolution of monasteries, and from 1534 to 1538, all but a couple of religious houses in England were closed down, likewise in Wales. In Ireland, we went through the same process about the same time. Scotland did not for a further 30-odd years. Anyway, so Henricus Octavius, he confiscated the property, so much ecclesiastical property, because there's a Roman Catholic Church and there's a Church of England. I suppose these monks and nuns were nominally part of the Church of England for the first few years, but they didn't really notice the Church of England had been set up a year before this whole thing began. And so the king suddenly had loads of property to finance one of his 3 long calamitous wars against France. That was ruinously expensive, not for France, for England, Ireland and Wales. And so then he began to flog off this realty, mostly to the property classes, the landlords. These magnates were the only people who had the money to buy these things. I know we talk about the 16th century as the early modern age, but really it was still the, still the Middle Ages. And so land was a resource to have. There were a few businesses. There wasn't industry as such. So that was that. So some of the aristocrats, they purchased this real property, including what's now Longleat, purchased for the princely sum of £350. It's worth a trifle more than that these days. So why is it called Longleat? Because there's this man-made waterway, and there's a long waterway through it, a bit of a canal. So it's in Wiltshire, which is a little bit to the east of Bath, that county. So the Marquis of Bath owns it. It has these landscape gardens which were made by Lancelot Brown, commonly called Capability Brown. So Lancelot Brown was born in the English Midlands in the mid-18th century. He was the son of an under-gardener, became an under-gardener himself, the many gardeners for some grandee's house. But Lancelot Brown was known for his diligence, his industry, and his unexampled ability to transform gardens by sheer dint of hard work, or partly nous, this inborn ability, his green thumb. And so soon he was very much in demand by title people, and they're the ones who had filthy lucre in the 18th century. It was a crashingly snobbish society. And so, Capability Brown, he started out as a plebeian, and I suppose he always, in a sense, remained a plebeian, but he ended up very affluent indeed, a man of considerable property, a multimillionaire in modern terms, by reshaping the gardens of the great and the bad, and digging these ha-has, as I've shown you in one previous video, as in a trench in a garden to keep the deer out, away from the flower beds. But from the stately home at the top of the hillock, you couldn't see the ha-ha. That's why it's a joke, a ha-ha. And why are the deer not coming into the garden to eat the roses or something? Because there's this trench they can't get over, or indeed also a ha-ha to trap them. Why they can't escape? They're always within view because it's a ha-ha. And again, it's an optical illusion. You're not able to see it owing to the angle. So they got a few of those in Longleat. And so the current Marquis of Bath, he inherited that title in the 70s. He's now roughly 80 years old, as was virtually compulsory for a British nobleman. He went to Eton, he went up to Oxford, which college, Christ Church, of course, which was the noblest college of all, and well into the 60s had a huge number of blue-blooded boys who were there. Obviously, in the 80s it went mixed. What else about all this and that? So yeah, Longleat, since the Marquis of Bath is an exceptionally colourful and eccentric character. Not for him, mindless good taste and conformity. He's also talking about his wifelets, the hundreds of the females of the Homo sapien species with whom he's had liaisons, and writing them up. And is no slouch when it comes to self-publicity. He's very eager to appear in all sorts of chat shows and so on. The way he dresses, smoking jackets, and I can't remember what you call them, those odd hats with a bit of a tassel hanging down. He cultivates his lengthy beard. He's very sort of unthreatening, approachable, affable, really odd, but pleasant, unobjectionable. So that's him. Is this a cultivated persona? I'm not sure. You can see, I saw this, or I dipped into this book, this photo book about the United Kingdom came out in the 70s when the current Marquis's father was alive, and the current Marquis was not the Marquis of Bath. He had whatever junior title, courtesy title there is. His father held that title, the Marquis of Bath. And that man was very different, was austere, clean-shaven, distant, a bit banal, conventional, unexceptional, as one would expect a peer of the realm to be. Anyway, but since his decease, the title did solely and rightfully pass to the current Marquis of Bath. Incidentally, their surname is Thynne, Thynne, Thynne. But they're not known as Mr. Thynne. The Marquis of Bath is the head of the family. So that's well worth visiting. And since the 80s, there's been a wild animal park. You can drive around there on a sort of safari. And indeed, I've been there. It's on my niece's 3rd birthday. What a joyous day that was. And there's a miniature railway. An adult, you can just about squeeze into this little train carriage for a sort of 10-minute ride on the shore of the lake. So that was delightful. Drive through the enclosures with the wild beasts, big felines and such like. So very much worth a visit, about a 2-hour drive west of London. The British Isles, this is not a terribly big place. I can't quite call it a country, but people consider driving an hour here to be an exceptionally long time. So very much worth visiting. I'm not sure if the house itself is up for visiting, but it was too expensive to maintain the house and the estate without opening it to paying visitors. So there's obviously there is a playground and things like that, and a cafe. I don't know if I can say anything else about Longleat. Okay, so there you are, my fan, my admirer. So please direct message me, ladies and gentlemen. If you want online lessons, I teach online lessons in English literature, history, French, geography, politics and government, religious studies, and so forth, to help prepare people for GCSEs, A-levels, International Baccalaureate, SATs, interview practice. I help people prepare for law degrees. What else can I say? Book me as a tour guide in London. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook. What other social media am I on? It momentarily escapes my mind. I'm so clever. Beaky Witch. Ooh, well, I wish that was so. And now, Sorceress, do you name yourself so because it's Halloween Fright Night, tomorrow being the 1st and 30th day of October. Right, so I've got a superb verbal memory and exceptional verbal felicity, though I say so myself, but I think I can say that without fear of contradiction. Just because it's self-laudation does not render it bogus. And PayPal donations are warmly appreciated. Yes, they're more than welcome. Think of a figure which is most liberal and then increase it tenfold. You're a witch all year. Ouch! You cast a spell on me. Okay, I'm enchanted by you. Where were we? So, being a witch doesn't mean you worship the Antichrist, I hope. Yeah, and or indeed on Patreon. But the thing is, from Patreon, it simply goes to PayPal. There we are. Yeah, so that's that. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. I need these donations to sustain this channel. If it weren't for that, as you can see, the wages of YouTube are not bad, because this is the hovel that I inhabit. What was I saying? It's a bit like Trump preaching the prosperity gospel. If you indicate that you're well off, people are just queuing up to give you money. Whereas if you're poor, they'll just say, oh, you're just fucking poor. I'm not going to give you a bean. But Trump, he long ago realized that you got to project this image of success, and then people are eager to donate, whether it's true or not. But the thing is, you might say, yeah, but the affluent don't need it. But they thought that by buying his products or services, that somehow made them successful. Obviously, they couldn't have been more wrong, because with him it was largely a smoke and mirrors trick. Now, as you may have deduced, I have imbibed some spirituous liquor, which might explain why I'm somewhat in a crapulous state. But I think I'm not incoherent, so not quite disgracing myself. I'm not what the Geordies would call arse-holed. Anyway, girls and boys, ladies and gentlemen, my lords and ladies, your majesties, I think it's high time that I signed off. All right, so cheery bye-bye, as Super Ted would say.